Hi everyone, welcome to Behind the Manuscript. I'm Cheryl J. Muir of CherylMuir.com, and today we have with us Lauren Sapala. Lauren, great to have you with us.
Hi Cheryl, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So Lauren is a writing coach who focuses on the intuitive side of the writing process. And after years of feeling stifled and blocked by traditional writing methods, she created her own kind of process that really champions non-linear, big picture thinking as well as emotional decision making. Lauren really believes that every person has a creative sixth sense, which can be developed and used to create their best work. Lauren is based in San Francisco and blogs regularly on her website at laurensapala.com. And Lauren is also the author of the INFJ Writer. Lauren, I'm so excited to talk to you. We genuinely have such a similar journey and a similar perspective on things. So I can't wait to dive right in here.
Oh, thank you so much, Cheryl. I'm so honored to be here.
Absolutely. So you very much champion using your intuition and what we would call non-traditional writing methods. And you had a fairly discouraging experience with learning to write in a classroom setting. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, like most writers, I'd written from a young age. I wrote poetry, stories, everything you could think of, junior high, high school. And I got to college and I started taking creative writing classes. And these were all critique-based classes. So, you write your 10 pages, you pass them out to the class, and then that week when it's your turn, you have 30 people facing you, and they just kind of rip your manuscript apart. It's not even a manuscript, but your 10 pages or whatever it is. And this is pretty routine in most creative writing classrooms. This is what you do. It really didn't work for me. I felt horrified. I was frozen, paralyzed, ashamed. I felt humiliated. I didn't want to go to class. I didn't want to write. I was 19 years old, and I just thought something's wrong with me, because if I was a writer, if I was a real writer, this would come naturally. I would love for people to rip apart my stuff because I would want to be better and I would want to be the best. The classes were a disaster, and at the end of the year, the end of the semester meeting with my professor, she sat down with me and she said, "I just don't think you're very good at writing. And I think you should find something else to do." And I was crushed. And I'm like sitting there in INFJ catatonia, like panic, where outward stoic, but inward, I'm like dissolving and crumbling, trying not to cry. And so I said to her, "Well, do you think I could get better if I practiced?" She said, "No, I don't think so. You should just find something else." So I went home that night. I got very drunk. And I just said, "I guess that's it. I'm not writing anymore." And I didn't write for the next 7 years. And it was horrible. I was miserably unhappy all the time. I read everything. I worked in a bookstore. I couldn't get enough of books, but I was too afraid to write. And finally, I came to San Francisco and I found an ad on Craigslist for a writing group that was based on Alcoholics Anonymous, which I'd been a part of for the past year. And so I thought, well, I know AA, maybe I can do that, So I went to this writing program and we went around in a circle and said, "Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm a writer," told our little story, and then we wrote for an hour. And that was it. And no one critiqued it, and no one looked over your shoulder, and no one wanted to see what you were writing. And it worked. I didn't know what I was writing, but I wrote for a year, and then I realized I had a book. And so that's how I came to the process, and that's how I discovered critique really wasn't for me. Writing really was for me.
That's amazing. And that really resonates with me too. I think so often we look at the traditional method. Like I think back to my experience at high school, which was very similar, having someone just rip apart what you've created. And you think, well, maybe I'm just not very good at this. And maybe if this doesn't work for me, this means that I shouldn't be doing this. And if this person who's an expert, they're a teacher or a professor or whatever it might be, if they're saying it's bad, it must be bad. And I'm surely not good at this. And if I was good, I would be okay with the criticism. But as introverts, it's a completely different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Exactly. We think about things very, very deeply. We take things to heart, everything.
We do. We feel the feels. And because we feel the feels, we're able to write the feels. And that's a really beautiful thing. But we're very sensitive creatures. And it's a different process for us, definitely.
For sure.
So, with that being said, I mentioned being a different kettle of fish. That's a good segue into your analogy of stirring the fish tank which you mention in your book, The INFJ Writer. So what does it mean to stir the fish tank, and how does that relate to writing?
Well, I have a little bit of an explanation in the book, which I'll outline briefly. So when I was a teenager, I had a fish tank in my bedroom, which was more my father's idea than mine. I really didn't want the fish. So I didn't take care of the fish. And it sort of became an experiment in mold over the next 3 months. The fish tank ended up just black with slime. I think the fish were dead. I wasn't sure. I really didn't know what was going on with the fish. And then one day I said, I'm going to clean it out. I'm just going to get in there. And I got in there and I stirred the gravel, and it was disgusting. It was horrific. It was just this stench, came out. It took about a week for everything to settle. And then when it settled, it was clear again. Like I had scraped the sides, and it really struck me that that's sort of how the emotional process is. Everybody has sort of these big frozen chunks of trauma in their body from past experiences, from childhood pain, some people say from past lives, wherever it comes from, everybody has these big frozen chunks of trauma, and nobody wants to look at them because it's painful, it's uncomfortable. And when you start working on one of those chunks, whether you're in therapy or maybe you're in a new relationship and you're sharing, it starts to be that stirring the fish tank thing, where so much of the debris floats to the surface, and it's ugly and it's smelly and you're ashamed of it and embarrassed, but it has to be done. And that happens a lot in writing, even if you're not writing memoir, but especially with memoir. And that's why memoir is one of the most difficult genres to write in. This stuff comes up and you sort of feel responsible for the fact that it's ugly and it's smelly and you don't want to look at it. Who else would want to look at it? And all of those bad feelings come up. But that part of the process is very necessary to writing. And the more you write and the more you get comfortable with it, the more you realize that the fish tank's not a comment on you. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's not that it's ugly because you did it wrong, and if you did it better, it would be pretty. No, it's ugly for everyone. That's just how the emotional process of unearthing trauma goes. And I think it comes up for any writer, if they're writing fiction or even sci-fi or fantasy. We are in our characters. We are in our stories.
It would be so much more interesting for the purposes of this interview if I disagreed, but I completely agree with that. Even when we are writing fiction, what we know and what hurts us, what pains us, does tend to come up. Do you find writing to be a very healing process?
Oh, yes, totally. I mean, my first 3 books were all memoir. And I'd had a pretty traumatic childhood, and then I got into alcohol addiction for about 7 years. So when I started writing again, I'd been sober for only a year. So that was the first thing I wrote about, was that journey through addiction. And then I wrote about a journey through workaholism as a substitute, and I really found a lot of myself through doing that. And I have read that studies show when people write in a journal every day or they write memoir, their immune system is actually bolstered by that. Something in the body kicks in and starts making more immune cells. I think that's very true because you're taking care of yourself. It is a form of self-care, even if it's uncomfortable at the time. A lot of self-care, sort of like deep tissue massage. You get that deep tissue massage, you come home that night and you're kind of achy, but you really needed it. That's how I look at that, the memoir writing or even fiction.
Yeah, and I don't want to go into too deeply into addiction, but because it's something I've been through as well, I if that's okay with you, I'd love to ask.
Oh, yeah.
When you were in your addiction, did you write during that time or no?
No, I wasn't writing at all. I would try to write. I would sort of set like goals for myself and resolutions, like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to write, even if it's a paragraph or even if it's a journal entry. I couldn't even keep a journal. And now I see that that was part of the addiction. I was in a very unhealthy place. And I wasn't willing to give myself any nourishment at the time. And writing is nourishment for artistic souls.
Yeah, it's so interesting. For me, I didn't write at all during my addiction either. It's like I completely forgot it was even there.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think addiction is really, it's a way of sort of blocking out the world and blocking out your world. When you're an introvert, the world is really your inner world. Mm. You know what I mean?
You see what you want to see almost.
Yeah.
What you see is a reflection of what's going on inside.
Yeah, we have our own place inside, and that's where we retreat to, but that's the place we go first. Then we kind of venture out into the outer world after we've spent some time in our inner world. And when you're an introvert in addiction, that inner world is the first thing to suffer because it's just filled with that critical loop, you know, that critical voice and the shame and, you know, just the self-talk, the negative self-talk. So the inner world really becomes hostile. And I think that's why for introverts, addiction is so hard. I mean, I know it's hard for everyone, but I definitely think it's very hard for highly sensitive introverts.
That's fascinating to me. I never saw it that way. I never overlaid introversion and extroversion onto addiction, but you're so right with it. When we are introverted, we go into ourselves. And so if that place is a hostile environment, of course, that's going to be toxic.
Yeah.
Gosh, I never thought of it that way. So channeling, I want to talk to you about channeling.
Oh yeah.
That's something I do, I would say like 95% of the time that I write, but I don't know many writers who use it. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about what is channeling and how can you writers use that as a tool?
Well, I think the thing with channeling, let's see, how can I say this? I think a lot of people do it, but I don't know that they would put the name channeling to it because channeling almost has like that spiritual connotation.
Right.
And I'm a very spiritual person. And when I talk to people, I say, hey, I'm pretty new age. Let me just put that out there so they know what to expect. But if someone's uncomfortable with the spiritual aspect of life, or if even someone's very scientific and very analytical and they feel uncomfortable with things that don't have rational facts to back them up, they might prefer saying accessing the subconscious, which to me, in my opinion, the subconscious is our link to the divine. Now, I know a lot of scientific people would just be horrified that I said that, but that's what I feel, and that's how it feels to me. When I work with my characters, I treat them as if they're just in a different reality. They're on a different plane than I'm on, but they're real people. They're not people I made up. Do you know what I mean? They're not people that I made up and now I'm making them do things, which I think a lot of people who are non-writers think that's what writers do. Like we make up people and then we kind of move them around like puppets. I've never had that experience. For me, when I try to move a character around like a puppet, it's just like in real life. They don't like it. They kick back and they don't want to have anything to do with me. So I think you can really explore your own issues of control with your characters. You really have to become comfortable with not being attached to another person's outcome. And as you're writing them into being, like you are their portal into this reality. And I've written characters and I'm thinking, I can't believe she's doing this. Why is she making this choice? This is going to be so bad. And I just want to shake her. But that's what she needs to do. And if I'm just hands off and I say, okay, I don't know what she needs to make this choice, I usually will find 150, 200 pages later, oh, that's why she did that. That's why she made that choice, because she had to meet this person and this had to happen. And that's the way this was all supposed to unfold. But my rational mind, my conscious mind has no control over that. Does that make sense?
It's like, I couldn't have articulated that better than myself. And that's exactly how I write too. And do you find that when you're writing a scene, it can go a completely different way to how you expected and the characters just write it themselves?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. And I think this is something that's very hard for a lot of writers because a lot of times the scene will go in a certain way where something will happen and you think, well, what are other people going to think of that when they read it? So maybe something violent happens, or maybe something that's a hot topic politically right now happens, or maybe something racist happens. And the writer is just thinking, oh my God, I'm going to put this out on Amazon and everyone's going to read it. And they're going to write that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to say, how dare she bring up this horrible, racist topic? But that's what happened. I didn't make it up. I'm just reporting. I'm just on the scene. I'm just taking notes on what I see. I don't really have any control over what I see. I think that's really hard for a lot of writers to deal with when they get into really, really good territory with their writing. It tends to be very uncomfortable territory.
Yeah, that really resonates too, because it is very much like reporting on what's happened. The characters are coming in and they're saying whatever they say. Like, I know I've been working with Devon in one of my books, and he's so intelligent and so smart, and he's weaving this whole plot, and I'm thinking, God, he's so smart. I never could have thought of that. And someone might be reading that thinking, I'm smart and I created that whole plot, but that wasn't me, that was him. He created all of that. And I wondered, where do you think, when you're channeling, where do you think these people are coming from?
Well, my opinion is that the characters choose the writer. And for every character that wants to come into our reality, that wants to be written into being, there's only one writer out there that's right for them. So if you are feeling that call from a character, you haven't been chosen lightly. They're choosing you for a reason, and they're usually choosing you because you have some issue in common with them. There's something in you that corresponds to something in them, and they know that you get it. No matter how dastardly they might be, no matter what a villain, they might just be like a complete bum, you know, where you're like, this person's just awful. But they know that deep down, you know them like no one else can, and you can accept them on a level like no one else can. That's why they chose you. And that's why I always tell my clients when they say, I don't know if I can finish this book. I don't know if I'm equipped to write this book. I don't know if I have the chops yet. And I say, the character wouldn't have chosen you if you weren't supposed to write it. You were not chosen lightly. This is an extreme honor, and you need to appreciate it. You know, the best thing you can do is sit your butt in the chair and hold up your end of the agreement. And I've also found that characters really, it is an extreme honor, but that doesn't mean they'll appreciate you. My characters will tend to get very irritated with me sometimes. That I'm not working fast enough for them, or that maybe I'm paying attention to another character, and they're very like needy. Some of them are very needy. Like, no, you need to be like total narcissists, you know? Not every character is fun to work with. For me.
I've had that same experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with characters that I've been afraid of.
Me too. Me too. Tell me about that.
Right now I'm working with a character who, he's very interesting, but he's very dangerous. He's a cult leader. He has the charisma of a Charles Manson, and he's really bringing people in, and he doesn't have their best interest at heart. And he's very charming, and he's very smart, but he's kind of a sociopath. But part of me, I love him. I just deeply love him, and I always will. And I know he has awful plans up his sleeve. You know, he really is going to commit a lot of violence, but I love him, and I always will to my dying day. And I know that's why he picked me. You know, we have a bond that he couldn't share with anyone else.
Oh, you're speaking my language. You're speaking my language on so many levels. I love this. So we met one another on Twitter.
Yes.
Which I love the Twitter machine. It's amazing. More authors, more writers need to be on Twitter. I'm trying to start like a revolution. Like, it's not just Facebook and Facebook groups. Like, get on over to Twitter. There's amazing people like yourself on there. So like, get on there. And I remember seeing your pinned tweet at the top of your feed about the INFJ writer and being immediately attracted to it. But for those who don't know what an INFJ is, and I know we've covered this a little bit, but tell us a little bit about that personality type and why it's so significant to creativity.
Well, okay, so the thing about Myers-Briggs, and it's funny because a couple people have commented that they've read my book and they say, nowhere in the book do you explain what the Myers-Briggs system is, or really how you know you're an INFJ, or the 4 functions, or any of that. And there's a reason for that. I learned that I was an INFJ online. And you can go to the website, you know, there's a Myers-Briggs website, you can take the personality test. It will let you know if you're INFJ, INFP, and, you know, the 4 functions. So INFJ is introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. And once you really start diving into these websites across the internet, every INFJ website you come across will have that little explanation of what an INFJ is and the 4 functions. And I just got so tired of reading that. Like, I had done my research. So I figured the people who come to my book, they're just going to come to it. They're already going to know. They're already going to have done this research. But briefly, an INFJ is an intuitive introvert. So there are 8 different types of introverts. Some introverts are thinking introverts. Some people are intuitive introverts, feeling introverts, and all sorts of combinations across the 8. If people are really, really interested in the nuts and bolts of what an INFJ is, they should do the online research, because the online research explains it so much better than I ever could. And I'm not certified. I have a couple clients who teach the Myers-Briggs system and they are certified, but I'm not. But the intuitive introvert is usually a highly sensitive person, usually artistic, an idealist, someone who's very, very sensitive, but also someone who's very driven. And that's the thing about INFJs, is I think online too, they kind of get this reputation that they're very warm and fuzzy, and they're sort of like the saviors of mankind, and they're optimists, and under the surface, INFJs really aren't like that. INFJs are very ambitious. Almost all of my clients are INFJs, and they've got big plans. You know, they want to change the world, and you can usually, when you talk to an INFJ, at first they're very quiet, but then when they get going, it's like this drill. You can always kind of feel the drill, you know, and it's, especially if you get them on a topic they're passionate about, it's just like they're drilling into you, you know. Maybe it's like 16th century Chinese pottery, but they're on it and they want to tell you everything, and they are passionate, they're fired up, they're very charismatic about it. So it's really hard to describe what an INFJ is in brief. But I do recommend that everybody just go on the internet. There's so much information out there, and there's so much good information.
And it seems like the INFJ writer is really for that person who already knows they're INFJ. Like myself, I saw that and I'm like, boom, that's my book. Yeah. INFJ writer, that's my jam. So with all that being said, why do you think it is that so many of us writers are introverts? Is it because writing is a solo activity? Is it that simple, or is there a little bit more to it than that?
I think it's the intuitive piece. The introverted piece comes along with that deep intuition, but it's really, really the intuitive piece. My entire life, I have been highly intuitive, and I've relied on that on how to get through the world. Like, I can't remember what color my car is, but I'll meet somebody and within 2 minutes, I know if they have problems with their mother, you know what I mean? If they have low self-esteem, maybe they had an eating disorder in the past. Like, I just can kind of like real quickly put together those pieces. And I've always done that. And I always thought I was weird. I just grew up feeling very, very weird. And sometimes when I would talk to people, I would get a very clear image in my head, or a phrase, you know, like, he hates his father, you know, or I'd see like an image of a bicycle and be like, I don't know what that means. Am I crazy? And it wasn't until I got in my 30s when I realized, oh no, I'm getting information. I'm just getting like sort of telepathic information. And I gave up a long time ago trying to figure out, like, well, is that real? Does telepathy exist? How can I prove, you know, you can't prove it. I think INFJs universally have this experience. They get information. We get information from different places other than external reality, other than through our 5 senses. And in fact, our 5 senses aren't even really that important to us. A lot of times we don't even use them. I tell people a lot of times I don't use my eyes, and they say, what are you talking about? I'm like, I literally don't. I will run into a refrigerator. Like, I just don't see things. I trip and stumble all the time because I'm inside my head. But then I'll get very deep information about people constantly. I'm sure you've had the same experience.
Yeah, I have, very much, very much. And I know before we started recording this interview, I was commenting that I have very, very similar glasses to yours. And it's very interesting how we both wear glasses, and we actually, our eyesight is not important to us at all, because we see things through our, how we feel. Like, I don't know about you, I always get a gut feeling. I get a physical sensation response to someone who's bad or someone who's very lovely and heart-centered.
Yes, for sure. And usually when I get that, like, this person is bad, it's, what if I dig, it's a deep, deep block of pain in them. There's some sort of trauma that they haven't addressed. That's what I've always found. I've never run across someone where I'm like, they're just evil and that's it, you know?
It's not that simple, is it? And I think that's going back to what you were saying about our characters choosing us. That's why when we're writing these people who might be a villain, or maybe they're a bit of an anti-hero, and they do really bad things, but we understand why that is. When you can see that someone's been through immense trauma and they go on to make these choices, it's a little more easy to empathize with them, I think.
Definitely. No one's ever just born evil.
It's not that simple. And yeah, it would be too simple and too basic just to say somebody is black and white, evil or not evil. People go through things, and that's what makes it so fascinating to write about them. So I'm fascinated about the channeling of the characters, and I'd love to dive a little deeper into that.
Okay.
When a villain comes to you that really scares you, or whether it's a villain or, like, say, an anti-hero, how do you kind of maintain boundaries with that character if they're quite domineering and also quite scary?
Oh, well, that's interesting that you ask that. Because a lot of times in my life, I have been attracted to toxic people. And I think a lot of writers have, and we're taught in our culture today, this culture of self-help and therapy, that everyone should have healthy boundaries. And if you don't have healthy boundaries, well, you should just learn how to do that. You know, that's what you go to therapy for. And to be a healthy, functioning adult, you know your limits and you know your boundaries. And that's just not true. That's just not realistic. A lot of people don't have healthy boundaries. Some of us have healthy boundaries sometimes, but then we lose them.
Or we do with some people and not others.
Exactly. I think of your boundaries as sort of like a fence. It's a fence around your property. And sometimes you were busy that winter and a raccoon chewed a hole in the fence and you didn't see it and somebody got in, you know?
I love that.
And it just happens. That's life. With my dangerous, scary character that I'm working with right now, I mean, he got in, and I have days where I feel like he is just in my head and he won't let me go. And, you know, I told someone the other day, I said, I feel like, you know, when a dog is scared of thunder and they're like pacing back and forth between the door and the living room, just whining. I was like, that's what's going on in my head. Like, I can't get away from this guy. It's not healthy. It's definitely not healthy, but I'm willing to go there. This is the most interesting writing experience I've had yet. And that's just the choice you make, you know, and I've done that with people in real life. I've brought people into my life for a few years who were incredibly toxic, but I got a book out of it. You know, I don't know what else to say. Like, I know that sounds horrible, but I got a book out of it. And maybe that was why they came in. You know, I learned a lot too. But I'm not one of those people that's like, well, you only need to have healthy people in your life. And, you know, if they have something going on, you just have to like put that boundary in place that like you can try, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
That's really reassuring to feel that, to hear that, because I feel that too. Sometimes you want to maintain that boundary, but like you say, like the raccoon's got in and he's here now, and you're thinking, well, I guess I'm writing about this very dangerous, scary mob boss who I kind of love, even though he's really awful, but it makes for really, really good writing.
Well, I think what it comes down to is it's desire. Sometimes you meet that toxic person or that toxic character and you know they're bad, but you just feel this overwhelming desire. And in our culture today, we're really afraid of desire.
Yes.
Totally. Like when desire consumes you and it comes in and runs the show and you're not in control anymore. And your identity might slip, you know, your public mask might slip. You might do something out of desperation. You probably will, because desire can make you desperate. Desire really pushes all the buttons and it really shows you your limits. And it's like, oh, let's get on those limits. Like, let's walk those limits like a tightrope and see if you fall. All your stuff's going to come up. Everything. All the stuff you think about yourself, all the stuff you remember, maybe your parents said to you in childhood, all of your morality, that's really scary stuff. So when you meet that toxic person or that toxic character and, oh God, they just attract you, it's really, really frightening. And I think a lot of people back off then. They get that like, oh, the desire's so strong, it must be bad. That's embedded in our culture too. I feel the strong desire, it must be bad. I don't know if that's your take on it.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think it makes for very interesting writing when you have that desire and that passion for a character, and there's this kind of two-way dialogue where you're channeling their words and writing them, and I'm writing this and thinking, oh God, Frankie, you're awful, you're so awful, but he's chose to work with me for a reason, and then that causes self-reflection. You're thinking, okay, why is it that this character has come into my orbit? Because I actually am not comfortable, but I am going ahead and pushing through and writing about him, knowing how awful he is, and I'm in my mind already justifying when people are going to say, oh, what that character did was so awful. I'm like, yeah, but he went through this and this is why he did this awful thing. And you also almost become their, I don't want to say wingman, but you sort of become their buddy. You kind of stick up for them and justify their actions, which is quite concerning.
It is. Yeah. I've had that exact same experience. You're almost like the apologetic spouse, you know?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think too, you know, when that desire comes up in the writing and for the character, a lot of your shadow comes up too. A lot of the stuff that we desire comes from our shadow, you know, and that's the same across the board. Like our obsessions, our fetishes, that's all stuff from our shadow. That's stuff that we think is bad. It's usually not bad, you know, but in our mind, in our belief system, a long time ago, we decided this is bad. But then our mind gets really curious. It's like, oh, this is so bad. I want in. You know, I want to look at this.
Yes.
I want more of that.
It's kind of like don't touch the wet paint, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's amazing.
That comes up in writing a lot.
And do you find you, because I use a very much like a method acting approach to writing, and I have to really get into a place that reminds me of my character. So I was writing about an assassin, so I went to shoot a gun. Do you use any tools like that at all?
The one big tool I use is music. I really, really use music. And when I'm using music, I have done this my whole life, but a song will almost like catch in my head, and I'll listen to it like literally 76 times in a row. And I've had roommates who just are like, you're nuts. Like you just sat in a room and listened to the same song for 2 hours. That's really like crazy territory. And when I'm doing that though, it's not like I'm just listening to music as background noise. It's like I'm really, really intently, I'm getting these images. I'm getting a flood of images. And for me, that's where the channeling really comes in. It's all about the image. The image is usually linked to something, some sort of archetype. And you can usually say, I see him as a king, you know, or I see him going to war, or I see her sort of becoming like the mother that abandons her children. Like it's usually an image, and then you can sort of like peel away the layers of that image and get to what's going on. It's very intense work though.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't just like casually do the music method, you know, in 15 minutes. Like I kind of need a few hours.
I'm exactly the same. It's kind of like when I watch it, I'm sure you're the same with TV shows. People go, oh, you should watch this TV show. And I say, I can't just watch a TV show. I go full immersion. Most people finish watching a show and go, that was good. I'm going to go get on with my life now. Not me. I'm Googling, where was it made? Where did it come from? I want to know like the actors, like where are they from? Like where did they live? What's their background? What else have they been in? Like I go full immersion. And I used to think this is crazy territory. This is crazy town. This is like there's a fangirl and then there's like me. There's like it's a different level. But actually with writing, that our processes are so similar. It's same thing, full immersion, using the music as, for me, it comes through not as images, but through I get it's more of a psychological state. I have to get myself in to be able to channel that character. So I'll have a playlist for each character. It'll just be random things off YouTube that I've kind of schlumped into an Excel sheet. It's nothing too sexy. I'll listen to Frankie's songs. I'll get into that very dangerous kind of almost angry state of mind, and then he comes through and writes. So that's so fascinating that you use music too.
Yeah, I've also had that. I've had a character who's very angry, and it's like I'm writing and I'm like, every other word's a curse word. Like, what is my reader's gonna think? But that's how he talks. That's how he thinks.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because there is a distinction too of that's him, that's not me, but that's him. I sat down to write the scene thinking it was going this way, and holy crap, I didn't expect him to say that or her to do that. And oh gosh, now I've got to try and stitch this up. But actually they have a plan for how it's all going to roll out, and we are really, I think you said before, we're like the vessel or the portal. And we just have to let it flow. Now, I wonder how many writers actually understand that, how many talk about writer's block and getting stuck, when actually, if you just allow yourself to, whether it's music you use or whatever tool it is people use, to just get in that state of allowing the characters to come through, actually, there's no such thing as writer's block because they have endless ideas.
Well, I think that it's about giving up control, you know, like we were talking about desire, and that's really, really hard. And that's how all of life is. If, you know, I was talking with my husband earlier and I said, you can tell the choices in life that you try to make that you're not supposed to, because you're sort of beating your head against a closed door and you just will try and it just doesn't come through. But the things that you're supposed to do, it's like the pieces just fall into place, you know, the odd coincidences, the synchronicities, but you have to give up control. You're not the one driving the bus. You're just on the bus, you know, having a good time. And your only responsibility is have a good time. Look out the window, see who's sitting next to you, you know, read a book if you're bored till the next thing happens. But giving up control is very, very hard. And I think it's very hard for people in the Western world, especially because we're born and raised to believe that it's all about control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So will there be a follow-up to the INFJ writer? Will you write that type of non-fiction again about the creative process, or are you working on fiction? You know, I thought you said you're working with a cult leader on a fiction book.
Well, I am planning spring of 2017. I'm going to put out my first memoir, all about my alcoholic years. So that'll be the next one that's actually going to come out. But I do plan to write more of the self-help type books. What I've been studying this year, I've been really trying to work with my own belief systems. I came to selling and marketing with the sort of idea that selling and marketing is bad, it's unspiritual, it's shallow, businessmen, and I've really been saying, okay, I'm gonna work on these belief systems and see, are they true? And is there something else? So I've been reading a lot of books on money and marketing and businesses. And I would love to write a book for intuitive, sensitive, idealist artists on how to learn about marketing, how to learn about selling, and make it fun. For a long time, I denied that part of myself, that I have a salesman in me and he wants to come out. You know, he loves talking to people, because I've always said, I'm an introvert, I hate people. I don't hate people, I love people. I love learning about their stories, and I love making connections, and I love networking with people. So that's the next kind of book I'd like to write, is sort of a marketing and selling for writers who hate marketing and selling, or think they do.
That's perfect. And I think I've personally done a lot of work myself on the money mindset side and the belief systems around selling and money and success, because I think so many writers just come to the table as a writer and they write this beautiful book and they go, I'm done, I'll build it and they will come. But actually this author entrepreneur kind of fusion, if you will, is such an important element, because you can write the best book in the world, but if nobody knows about it, nobody's able to purchase it.
Well, exactly. And I think a lot of writers, especially the intuitive introverts, think, but I'm going to hate being an entrepreneur. They think I'm already going to hate that. I don't want to do that. When really they already have that peace within them. There's so much, you get to be so creative and so flexible. And you have to actually be really creative if you're working with no budget and a staff of one and from your kitchen table. You have to be really, really creative, and it's fun. It can be really fun for artists. So I'd like to sort of bring them into the gateway and just show them, like, hey, this can be really cool. This can be something that you're excited about, not something you dread.
Absolutely. And with writers, we've already chosen the non-traditional path. We are not, quote unquote, and I hate the word, but normal. We don't follow the 9-to-5 route. That doesn't work for us. And so if you've already chosen that as a writer, being an entrepreneur is really not that different.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us, Lauren, where can we find you online?
My website, laurensapala.com, LaurenSapala.com. You can just Google my name. I'm also very active on Twitter. I'm on Twitter Monday through Friday. I do have an enforced no online time during the weekend, so you'll never really see me on Twitter during the weekend. I try to just kind of stay offline and sort of, recoup. I'm on Facebook a little bit, but not that much. I love talking to people on Twitter. Like, find me on Twitter, tweet me, tell me you have a blog, tell me to follow it. I will. Tell me you have a book, I'll read it. I love reading other people's books. And my email, writecity, WRITECITYSF@gmail.com, writecitysf@gmail.com. I love to talk to writers.
Oh, amazing. And I'm so glad that we got to meet on Twitter. Twitter is such an amazing tool for writers, and more writers need to use it. So we need to be preaching the Twitter machine. It's amazing.
Oh, for sure.
I've absolutely loved talking to you, Lauren. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. And I'll just round up here and let you guys know that that's it for today's episode of Behind the Manuscript. We have brand new author interviews every 2 weeks. So remember to hit subscribe, and we will notify you every time we have a new episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.